Hey there, it's Kat and this is BrewsandReviews. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Legend by David Gemmell. Now before we get started on this review, I need to say a couple of things. The first is that this book is my favourite book of all time. It has been my favourite book since I was 13 years old and I'm now 28, so it's like 15 years. It's a very long time. So this isn't going to be an unbiased review. It's going to be biased. It's my favourite book, he's my favourite author. I will try to be as fair as possible while I'm reviewing this book, but I just thought you guys should know that I definitely have an undying love for this book, and that probably will seep through into this review. Now the second thing that I want you guys to know is that this review is probably going to be a garbled mess. And that is because I cannot talk about this book and form sentences that are real English. I don't know what it is, I try and talk about this book and it comes out like word vomit. It's just a gush of emotion because this book does mean a lot to me, so I'm going to do my best to form coherent sentences, but no promises, because I've tried before, it's hard, okay? It's hard. Alrighty then, let's get into this review, and I'm going to put this down because I am keenly aware of how shiny it is and my light is probably reflecting really shinily on it, and I'm sure you guys don't want to just be like blinded every 2 seconds. So I'm going to put it down. You know what book I'm talking about? It's Legend. We're going to start off with a synopsis, talk about some non-spoilery things, and then maybe talk about some spoilers at the end, but I will warn you before I start talking about them. I think the afterword of the audiobook came up with the best sort of summary for this book, and that is, what would happen if the world's greatest army came up against the world's greatest fortress? And this is a siege book. It has also been described as a darker Minas Tirith type battle. A lot of the book is a battle. So Legend mostly takes place in the fortress of Dros-Dal-Noch, which is, for all intents and purposes, the world's greatest fortress. Dros-Dal-Noch is a massive fortress with 6 huge walls built for defence, and it is the only fortress bridging the gap between Draenei lands and the plains beyond. So if any attacking force was intent on invading the lands of the Draenei, then they would have to come through Dros-Dal-Noch. Now the problem is, Dros-Dal-Noch is very understaffed. Understaffed? That's not the right word. They don't have very many men there. The lands of the Draenei are effectively in decline and they don't have as much of a fighting force. They're scared and unprepared. The Nadir are a race of nomadic tribesmen who were spread all across the plains up until recently when they were united by Ulrics of the Wolf's Head tribe. Now Ulric is intent on expanding and invading neighbouring countries. He has made a name for himself. Ulric is a very clever man, and he is bringing his army to Dros-Dal-Noch, and that is where the action of this book takes place. I think the beginning of this book does a really good job of building the sense of hopelessness that is sort of permeating Draenei lands, because they know that this war is incoming, they know that the Nadir are going to invade, and they know that they're probably all going to die. Nobody can stop this force, and they're going to get invaded, people are going to get murdered, their lands are going to get taken over, it's going to be a bad time for everyone. So everyone's pretty much depressed. And it's like the calm before the storm, but it's a depressing calm. They know that they can't win this fight, and I think it's really interesting how different characters choose to face that knowledge. So we have a few main characters that we follow throughout. Druss, the 60-year-old grizzled war veteran who is known as the Legend for his amazing exploits in being able to turn battles around. He is a name that is known throughout the world as this amazing warrior. But he's old, he's got a bad knee, and he knows that he's probably gonna die soon. So he decides to go to Dros-Dal-Noch and fight, because what else would he do? Then we have our other main character, Rek. He's known as a wanderer, and he's a really interesting character because he is a man who was formerly in the army, figured out that he was Berserk. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how the guy in the audiobook pronounces it, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it, which effectively means that when he's in battle he goes a bit thoughtless and goes a bit crazy. I always thought it was Berserk, but like apparently I was wrong. Anyway, he just becomes a killing machine. And then he feels really bad about it and has PTSD afterwards. So he quit the army, he has horrible memories, he thinks of himself as a coward and does do some cowardly things sometimes. Now at the beginning of the book he is travelling away from the war because he doesn't want anything to do with it, and then he happens to run into a woman who is being attacked by 3 men. And this is where he meets Beret, who is the daughter of Earl Dal-Noch. So she's just come from Dros-Dal-Noch to send a message somewhere else, and then they have met. So they form a relationship. That's not really a spoiler, it happens in like chapter 3, so I really don't think I'm spoiling anything there. I'm really sorry if you do regard that as a spoiler. Sorry. I think that's a really interesting reaction to the hopelessness that everyone in Draenei is feeling, because they found each other and they are instantly infatuated with each other. They develop this romance really quickly and they call it love, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this is love. I think that with the sense of impending doom, something could be found there and they clung to it. Now this is one of the problems that I have with this book, is this insta-love. It's the infatuation. I don't particularly like it. I've never really loved insta-love in books, but I will give it a pass in this book because Ray thinks she's gonna die and Rex's like ladies. So, I'll give them a pass because they're definitely not a perfect couple. It's proven much later in the book when some things happen, and there's something in particular I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section that I didn't like about their relationship, but we'll talk about that later. So the next group of characters I want to talk about are the 30. Now this is a group of 30 warrior priests who worship the source, which is effectively the source of all things. It's one of the major religions that goes throughout the Draenei saga, and I think it's really interesting. The 30 have the ability to go into people's minds, they have other powers, they know things, they can see the threads of the future. It's a very interesting time. So there are different generations of the 30. If they're called upon by someone who is worthy, then they will go and fight to the death in horrible battles. That's the history of the 30. So that's what they go into this book prepared to do. They think they're going to die from the off. So they have a very specific mindset, knowing that they can trust in the source and that they can potentially save people's lives. So I think that they're a really interesting addition to this as well. We also have a guy called Orin. He is a Gan, which is essentially like a general. He's in charge of Dros Delnoch, while Earl Delnoch is not doing so well. He's not a very healthy guy. Nepotism has essentially put him in charge of Dros Delnoch, and it's not going well. He doesn't have the respect of his troops. People are thinking of deserting. He's not really a natural warrior. Orin is such an interesting character though, because he grows so much through this book. He's not a born fighter, he is not a born leader. At the start of the book, he's not likable at all. And yet, he grows throughout the book. By the end of this book, you're like, yes, I would fight alongside this man, because he works really hard and he puts the effort in. There are also some archer bandit type people. Their leader is called Bowman, and his banter just made me really smile. Now those are mostly the main characters that we're following throughout the book, but David Gemmell also focuses on other people who are in Dros Delnoch or in the pub complaining that they might desert because everyone's going to die anyway, or the farmer that was conscripted because he thought, oh, we'll only be there for like 6 months and then we'll go home and it'll be great. Spoiler, it's not great. So this is something that continues throughout the book, from before the battle to everyone's feelings to during the battle, where you see little acts of bravery. There is a page section that talks about small acts of bravery that happen in the first day of fighting, and I just think it's a really nice addition because it helps to build a more well-rounded battle, and it helps to make these scenes so vivid. All of these different people are sort of put into the melting pot of Dros Delnoch, and they're all standing together against this huge force. Before the battle begins, Ray and the 30 are travelling towards Dros Delnoch. Dros makes it to Dros Delnoch and starts training everyone. He's kind of cantankerous though. He is very grumpy, he will not take any stick from anybody, but he's really good at training these soldiers and boosting their morale, which is what they need. They all know that they're probably going to die, but it sort of becomes, how many people can you save? How much time can you buy the rest of the country to get warriors together and trained so that they can defend? And it's very much about doing the honourable thing, even in the face of impossible odds. The way that he trains characters, it's like he makes them into teams. He gives them competition, but he also gives them unity, and I think that's kind of a perfect mix for these characters who were so divided that they were going to desert quite recently. Okay, so now I get to talk about the battle itself, which is just so cool. There are just so many things that happen that just stick in my mind so vividly. David Gemmell is a master at writing battles. I can't say that in any other way, because he is. If you want a fantasy battle that's going to stick in your head, this is the book for you. It just is. It's so good. And the battle scenes are just fantastic. I think the setting of having different walls with killing grounds between them and the morale that is associated with each wall is extremely fascinating. I won't go into this too much because I do think it's kind of a spoiler, because this section happens, I think, over 200 pages into the book, so I don't really want to spoil that. But whichever wall that the defenders are on, so say they're on wall 6, the furthest away from the keep, it will correlate to the mood that they are feeling. So when they move to wall 2, they will have a different mood. And they're all named based on the mood that the defenders would be feeling at that time, and I just think that's so cool. It's really cool, but I don't want to say what the moods are or what the names are or anything like that, so if you've read it, you'll know how cool it is, and if you haven't, you should read it so that you can know. So I'm going to move into spoiler territory now, because I want to talk about the things that happen in the battle. So if you haven't read Legend, then I do advise you to turn this review off now and go and read it. And then you can come back later if you still want to hear me talk about the spoilery things. But if you don't, then I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you in the next one. And now we're going to Spoiler Town, so I think I've given enough warning and I'm going to start spoilering things now. So let's talk about all the death! So much death! Oh, so much death. I did describe this before as a darker Minas Tirith. This is a darker Minas Tirith of death. Don't like anyone, because they're probably going to die, and it's going to be a sad time for you. This book makes me cry every single time I read it, and I'm just going to say the last 50 pages, tears everywhere. Just... I can't help it because I get so emotionally attached to these characters. I'm very invested in them, even though I know what's going to happen to them because I've read this book like 8 times before now. But that's beside the point. I cried the first time and haven't stopped since. Obviously, Druss's death is the death that destroys my soul. It's so sad. It's so sad. Because just the circumstances and that he knows it's coming, we all know it's coming, but the way that he goes down is something that I really, really love. And I love that the other characters, literally the people in charge of the fortress, are just like, oh, okay, we'll go and visit the Nadir camp because it's Druss's funeral and they won't kill us. And then they go and have a drink together and then they go back to have a fight the next day. Oh, it's just... I love it. Basically, I'm really sorry if you're still hanging around because I'm just letting my emotions go now and I'm just chatting absolute nonsense. But it's just such a good book. It's so good. I love the end of it. It makes me really sad. Also, the epilogue makes me really sad just because, you know, some people get happiness and some people don't get happiness, and that's depressing. Now, we'll just talk about a couple of things that I don't like because I do feel like I have been gushing about how much I really like this book, and there are a few problems that I have with it. There is this slightly ex machina nature of the Cthulhu and the ghosts that just sort of randomly appear. And I don't think there's really enough explanation about why Druss and the 30 sort of appear towards the end of the battle. But, like, I don't care. Because it's Druss Ghost. Logically, it doesn't make much sense to me. But, like, it's cool. So, I don't care. There's also a moment I didn't like where Rex slaps Beret when they're having an argument. And I didn't like that. I was like, was that necessary? No, it wasn't. Don't be a dick. While I love the end of this book, I do think that it is a little bit ex machina with the Cthulhu and the ghosts. I let that go, but also the reason that Ulrich leaves and the reason that the people survive, I mean, they're lucky. They're so lucky, because what are the chances that that would happen? Very slim. Very, very slim. Theoretically, they all should have died. Ulrich probably shouldn't have done what he did in going home, but he did, so that's how the book ended. That probably could have been done slightly better, but also I don't care, because it was just such a cool book. It's so cool. So in conclusion, this book is about morale and honour, and doing what you can, even in the face of hopelessness. And I think it will forever be my favourite book. I also didn't mention before, but this is also my dad's favourite book, and my dad gave me Legend when I was 13. Questionable parenting there, Dad. But, yeah, it is my favourite book, it's his favourite book, and the pair of us still reread Gemmell's books and chat about them and wish there were more. Well, that's a depressing note. Anyway, Gemmell is the best. Legend is the best. You should definitely read it if you haven't read it. And if you haven't read it and you're still here, why did you listen to the spoiler talk? Anyway, if you made it this far into the video and you want to leave me a comment but you don't have much to say, leave me an emoji of some sort, that would be great. I would really appreciate that. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!